Hello fellow coffee botherers, in this video we're going to be talking about this, the Sage or Breville Oracle Jet. This has been sent to me by Sage to review. I've not bought it, and if you think this will sway my opinion, you can think what you like, but you're wrong. It would take a lot more than that to buy the opinion of Coffee Kev.
How much, Kev?
Coffee Kev can't be bought.
10 grand?
100 grand?
Please.
£1 million.
This thing is amazing! Buy it now! Let's start off with the specs. We'll put the dimensions on the screen. Dual thermojet heaters, one for brew and steam and one for the group. Auto dosing and tamping via the tamp fan distributor. 58mm portafilter with single shot 12 or 13 gram basket and double, or some would say triple, shot 21 or 22 gram basket. All new grinder mechanism with stepless adjustment, allegedly 45 settings, but actually I'd say about 1,000, I'll explain. European Etzinger burrs, 4.5-inch touchscreen user interface, barista guidance, grind size suggestions, milk queue system, manual and auto milk steaming with adjustable presets for milk and alternatives, Wi-Fi connection for firmware updates, adjustable brew temperature from 86 to 96 degrees C in 1C increments, which also adjusts the group heater accordingly. Preset pre-infusion of 7 seconds or up to 12 seconds when pulling shots manually. Cold pressed espresso and cold brew style coffee options. Lots of drink options already and possibly more coming thanks to the Wi-Fi updates. 2.3 litre rear accessed water tank with front access via the flap. Easy front accessed lever to engage the wheel. Drip tray capacity of about 800ml. Maximum cup clearance of about 10.5 centimetres or just under 14 centimetres with a bottomless portafilter. Barista light with adjustable brightness, adjustable screen brightness, adjustable chimes volume including silent, 2 user modes, light mode and dark mode, and eco-friendly packaging. First I'm going to give the nutshell wrap up that I also give at the end of the video, literally just to help out anyone who wants this info but can't be bothered watching the entire video just to get this right at the end, and to save you having to skip to the end to find this. If you're someone who wants proper, true espresso and milk-based drinks that are potentially up to and even exceeding cafe quality, depending on what cafes you go to, of course, and depending on the beans you're using, and you're someone who wants this but also the interactive user experience and convenience of an automatic bean to cup or super automatic, and you'd usually only make a relatively small number of coffees at a time, this is probably made for you. If 1, you tend to make relatively small numbers of drinks at a time. If this isn't the case, then there may be a better option. 2, you have a fairly decent budget. We'll talk about the price in a minute. It's not the priciest, but there are much cheaper options. The Jet has some stuff going on for it that currently none of the other Sage or Breville machines have, not even the Oracle or Oracle Touch. Also, although there are some imperfections that I've picked up on that I'll discuss, I think nearly all of them will be ironed out thanks to one of the things that this currently has going for it that none of the other machines currently do. So with that said, I'll answer the burning questions you all must have. How much is it? In the UK it's about £1,700, in America it's about $2,000 and in Australia it's about $3,500. What the flip is a thermojet? I'm going to be saying thermojet a lot in this review, so I don't want to assume everyone knows what this means. Most people are familiar with traditional central heating boilers that heat up water in advance versus combi boilers that heat water on demand. Most traditional espresso machines have boilers. Most automatic coffee machines have on-demand water heaters. Thermoblocks or thermocoils that heat the water as it's passing through. The thermojets that Sage or Breville use are very slim, very fast heating thermocoils, which allow their machines that use these to be ready to use within a few seconds. And they're very energy efficient in comparison to boilers, especially for low volume use. It has 2 thermojet heaters, so does it work like a dual boiler? No, dual boilers can steam milk and pull shots at the same time. This has 1 thermojet for espresso and steam and 1 to heat up the group. So that does mean that you can't steam milk and pull shots at the same time like you can with the original Oracles, which are dual boilers. But they think that this doesn't matter for who they've made this for, and I didn't think I agreed with that until I got hold of it, but I kinda do now, as I'll explain shortly. Why don't they give it a 3rd thermojet so it can steam milk and pull shots at the same time like a dual boiler? Because this would probably happen. The thermojet heaters are energy efficient in that they heat water up really quickly, but they do use quite a lot of power while they're on. Up to 1600 watts, I'm told. But don't quote me, I'm clueless when it comes to electricity. I don't know what's what. With 3 thermojets potentially all running at the same time in some cases, the total power drawn would, I think, be too much for a lot of household power supplies. And it'd be more expensive, and for the people they've made this for, I don't think it'd be worth it, as the queuing system makes up for it, as I'll explain shortly. What's the new grinder all about? It has the same Etzinger burrs used on all the Sage or Breville integrated grinder machines now, the same burrs used in the Baratza Encore ESP, but the actual grinder mechanism itself and the burr carrier are all new. There's no longer an internal grind adjustment on the burr carrier. Instead, the entire range is available via the external dial, which I think is a great update. In case you're wondering what this looks like in terms of where you might end up going within this range, I'm finding with chocolate brownie blend, I'm dialed in at around grind size 23, so roughly the middle of the range. They advertise this as having 45 grinding settings. It actually doesn't. It has no grinding settings. It's completely stepless, but it has 45 digital reference points. So this is very, very good in terms of being able to make micro adjustments when dialing in, but the 45 digital grind settings I think are way bigger than they should be. Each digital setting represents about 60 degrees of a full turn, meaning that one complete turn of the dial is 6 settings, roughly 20 mil around the circumference of the dial. So if they wanted to, they could make the digital reference points much smaller and give us way more reference points. They could, for example, give it, let's say, 120 settings by default, which might be a more manageable number for most people, but then give us an advanced home barista mode with 1000 settings, enabling much more fine-tuning. That might sound over the top, by the way, but this would equate to turns of just under 1 mil, or about 2.7 degrees of a turn. Thankfully, they could do this in the future and release this in a future Wi-Fi firmware update, which brings us nicely to, it has Wi-Fi. Does this mean it has an app? No, it has a Wi-Fi chip. What this means is actually way more exciting than a smartphone app. What it means is that they can now push out new firmware updates to all of the Oracle Jets. This doesn't only mean that they can fix firmware issues going forward if they find them, although that's obviously a handy thing, but it also means it can continually develop this and roll out updates via Wi-Fi. They've already released some updates, for example, double tap to purge for the grinder and for the group, and the latest update is 3 new iced coffee recipes: espresso martini, espresso shakerato, and latte shakerato. Got no idea what they are, or if I pronounced them correctly. I think there are opportunities for loads of developments via firmware updates that they might not have thought of, or maybe they have thought of them, but they just thought they'd get it released with the most important features and then start working through others. I've sent them a wish list of add-ons that I think they could add to the firmware in the future relatively easily that I think would make this even better. One is to increase the number of grinder settings, as I've mentioned. Another is the option to change the espresso volume in much smaller increments, and to do it by ratio, or at least to see the ratio changing on the screen while you're changing the shot volume. And quite a few others, including an advanced barista mode and seeing detailed info on the screen that I know is in there in the debugging menu, and in theory they could bring that into the user interface. What coffee beans work best for this machine? I'd say freshly roasted beans, and I'm biased because I sell freshly roasted coffee beans at seaworks.co.uk, but this is a standard basket machine. You'd usually do better with pressurised baskets if you're using coffee beans that only have a best before date and no roasted on date. But what kind of freshly roasted coffee beans? Personally, although the updated grinder mechanism is potentially better than their other integrated grinder machines, I still think that the Oracle Jet, like most other machines with built-in grinders, will probably work best with relatively classic medium-dark espresso blends. Lance Hedrick, in his video on this, which I'll link to in the description, points out that he got an overheating warning when he tried to grind a very light roast. I've not tried anything light enough to prompt this, but I assume there's a digital failsafe built into the algorithm that prevents it from pulling over a certain amount of torque to prevent the gears from stripping. Honestly, I think the overwhelming majority of people thinking about buying this will want to use more classic medium to dark roast beans anyway. And if you're thinking about using light roast, you're probably not looking at an integrated grinder machine. While we're speaking of coffee beans, let's have a word from our sponsor. Have you ever played Hero Wars? Who cares? What are you on about? Our sponsor is me. We're that committed to quality at seaworks.co.uk that we don't use beans at all. We only use the seeds of the coffee cherry. And although we do have a few lighter roasts, the majority of our range, including blends and single origins, are focused on the more crowd-pleasing flavour notes. So most people watching this will probably love most of our coffee. Especially chocolate brownie blend, which is my absolute favourite for milkies. Want to try them? Of course you do. Use discount code YT25 for 25% off your first order at seaworks.co.uk. And sorry, by the way, we do get a lot of requests from outside of the UK, but currently we only ship within the UK and Northern Ireland. Let's get back to the Jet. What's the new touchscreen like? Splendid. It's bigger than Sage or Breville's other touchscreens, it's higher definition, it's much more responsive, and it's running on a faster processor, and you can do more with it. For example, there are 2 user modes, light mode and dark mode, and there's potential for more thanks to the Wi-Fi chip. You can move the drinks around, you can ditch drinks off the screen that you're unlikely to choose and easily bring them back. You can change the brightness of the screen along with the brightness of the barista light and the volume of the chimes. So compared to the Oracle Touch, the Barista Touch and Barista Touch Impress, it's way better, and to be honest, I think this possibly says more about those touchscreens being less than we'd expect for almost 2025, rather than this one being more than we'd expect for this day and age. Although to be fair, I don't think I've ever seen a coffee machine with a touchscreen as good as this. What's this about the processor? The brains of the machine is a quad-core processor. This is the reason the screen is faster and so on, but that's not the only thing. The processor being more powerful gives it capabilities in theory in various different ways, including all the algorithmic stuff going on with the temperature, the volumes, the milk texture and so on. Is this amazing and groundbreaking in that they're using a quad-core processor? After all, the first quad-core processor used in a smartphone was 2012. And this thing has 8 cores, and hands up if you don't even know what a core is. I thought only Apple phones had cores. Lol. I've seen a few comments along these lines, and yes, if we were looking at smartphones or laptops, we could say this isn't groundbreaking. Entry to mid-range laptops have quad-core processors. But we have to remember that this is a coffee machine. The fact that this needs a quad-core processor I think really says something about what's going on with electronics and how much potential it has, especially given that they can just keep on programming the firmware and updating it over Wi-Fi. Is the dose consistent? It is. It doses volumetrically, meaning the tamping distributor or tamp fan tamps the coffee when it reaches a certain height in the basket. In terms of grams, it'll usually be between 21 to 22 grams, depending on the coffee beans you're using and the grind size. But I'm finding with a medium dark roast blend, it's about 22 grams with the double shot basket. Can it do an 18 gram dose? Not currently, unless you want to tamp manually. You can adjust the tamp fan height to make fairly small changes to the dose, but to be able to use an 18 gram dose, you'd need to use an 18 gram basket, and this is something I've suggested to Sage. I don't see why they don't make an 18 gram basket for this, given that a lot of people want to make 18 gram shots, and if they did this, you could choose a roughly 18 gram shot by just using the 18 gram basket. What's the eco-friendly packaging? This is something Mark from coffeegeek.com mentioned to me when we were discussing this machine. They've clearly put effort into doing a better job of eco-friendliness with the packaging on the Oracle Jet, so Mark thinks it's important to highlight this so they keep it up with other machines, and I think that makes a lot of sense. They've moved away from the glossy, heavily printed boxes and they've ditched the polystyrene internally and they've switched to reinforced plant-based packaging. It's great to see manufacturers clearly trying to do a better job here, so this is great. Hopefully they'll roll this out to all their other machines. How loud is it? How hot is the espresso? How hot is the hot water for Americano? How hot is the hot water for tea? How hot is the milk? How hot do you want it? You can choose from 45 to 75 degrees Celsius, and the actual milk temperature is very close to this too. What's the auto frothing like? Needs a bit of work, I think. Full fat moo juice, amazing, works an absolute charm, almost as good as I can do manually. Milk alternatives though, including my favourite oat juice, Moma, sponsor please, that I can get amazing results with manually with the Oracle Jet, just don't seem to froth properly. Interestingly, I get better results with oat on the dairy setting, but it's still not great. It heats, but it just ends up with big bubbles and no real foam. I could be wrong, but I think this is down to the programming of the air pump. For whatever reason, the air pump setting works well for higher fat content whole milk, but it doesn't seem to want to work for lower fat content milk alternatives or lower fat content milk. Is this a big deal? Nah, they'll be able to fix this via a firmware update, and I'm sure they will do. What's the manual frothing like? Amazing. For me, this seems to be easier to use than the dual boiler Oracles. Yes, it's a bit slower, but I think a lot of people will find it easier to learn how to manually steam milk with the jet. One thing that's really helpful, and this is the same with the original Oracles, is that even when you're steaming manually, you still see the milk temperature on the screen. So you're never guessing. But also you can use this as a guide to tell you when to stop aerating. This will depend on how much you're frothing and so on, but I'm finding that if I aerate, keep the hissing sound going until it hits around 30 degrees Celsius and then lift up the jug slightly to just keep rolling and heating the milk, I get really good wetter texture that works well for pouring wiggly shapes like rosettas. Or if I keep aerating until about 35 to 36 degrees, I get slightly stiffer foam that tends to work a bit better for pouring stacks. What's the barista guidance like? Again, it's good, but it's not right. When it does give me a grind size guide, it always seems to be pretty much the exact amount more fine or more coarse, which makes me think it's not using the full capabilities of that quad-core processor. This needs to be improved, because in my opinion right now the Ninja Luxe Cafe 601, which is way cheaper, has more responsive and more precise barista guidance, which isn't right when you've spent this kind of money on a machine expecting it to be the best in all areas. We've done a few videos on the Ninja Luxe, so see the link in the description to the playlist. Don't get me wrong, this outperforms the Ninja Luxe in most other areas, but with the processing power it has, it should also wipe the floor with the Ninja where the barista guidance is concerned, and from my experience it doesn't. Again though, this doesn't concern me massively because I fully expect a future firmware update to fix this. What's the build quality like? Really good. Okay, it doesn't look and feel quite as premium as a dual boiler Oracle and Oracle Touch, but it's very nice to look at in my opinion, and it'll fit well into most modern kitchens. It'll also take up slightly less space than the original Oracles, because it's slightly smaller and that's how it works. Who is this made for? In my opinion, this has been designed for the same kind of market as the original Oracles, but specifically for people who only tend to make 1 or 2 drinks at a time. So this is people who want true portafilter espresso and proper microfoam milk texture, but with a similar level of convenience and user experience as fully automatic bean-to-cup coffee machines or super automatics. The original Oracles catered to this market, but they're really better suited to people who are making bigger numbers of drinks, and also people who have more predictable schedules when it comes to when they're going to want to make these drinks. The Oracle and Oracle Touch take a while to heat up. This will depend on your power and so on. I found it's about 6 minutes, which is actually very fast for a dual boiler. The time and energy used to heat up the 950ml steam boiler and the 450ml brew boiler is possibly a bit of a waste if you're then only going to make 1 or 2 coffees. In terms of time, I can make 2 flat whites made with 2 separate double shots and 2 separate jugs of milk with the Oracle Jet in about 4 minutes and 25 seconds. At that point, the Oracle and Oracle Touch won't even be heated up, so the Oracle Jet wins that race. It's just more convenient if you're only making 1 or 2 coffees. However, if you were making 4, 5 or 6 milkies back to back, the Oracle and Oracle Touch would win that race. Probably in terms of energy efficiency as well as speed, as the majority of the energy the dual boiler Oracles use is in getting the boilers up to temperature. You can also use the Jet for larger numbers of drinks when entertaining, but if you think the majority of your use would be just making 1 or 2 coffees, maybe once or twice a day, then this is really what the Jet is intended for. Also, because of the almost non-existent heat-up time, and yes, I'm taking into account the time needed to heat your cup, the Jet is better suited to more ad hoc coffee making. If you have a fairly rigid daily schedule and you tend to make more than 1 or 2 coffees at a time, the dual boiler Oracles may be the better choice, as you can make use of the scheduling feature. The Oracle Touch is even better for this, as it has 4 schedules instead of 1. But the Oracle Jet is ready to make coffees almost instantly whenever you fancy a coffee, so it really doesn't matter how predictable your schedule is. Why doesn't the lack of dual boilers matter for this market? It has the queuing system that the Touch and Press also has, meaning you can tell it to queue up the espresso to start after the milk is done or vice versa, and to queue up the espresso to start after the water for Americano. You can do that the other way round too, although you probably won't want to, as I'll explain in just a sec. So the amount of time that you'd actually save by having the additional energy usage of a third thermojet drawing up to 1600 watts of power, if you're the kind of user that I think this is really intended for, just wouldn't be worth it in my opinion. I think most people will start the milk first and then start the grinder, then lock the portafilter into the group and tap the brew icon to queue up the espresso, and then run off on their morning sock hunting quest, or putting butter on their toast, getting the kids ready for school or whatever. Just make sure you stay focused when you're doing this though. Putting butter on your kids and taking your toast to school will earn you some strange looks in the playground. Are there any other issues with the Oracle Jet that I think can't be fixed via a firmware update? There's only one or two that I've picked up on, and that is the water spout and the grind dial. The water spout on the Oracle and Oracle Touch is the type that just guides the water down towards a cup. The spout they've put on the Jet is similar to the one on most of their other integrated grinder machines, that sprays the water in a smaller stream at an angle. It's fine, but it's just a little bit more splashy. If you make your Americano water first, it'll still be splashy, but it's just water, so it's not a problem. If you make it espresso first, you can end up with coffee splashing out of the cup and it's a bit more messy. The grind dial sometimes slips when you're turning it, mainly when adjusting more coarse. Not a massive deal, I'm just not quite sure why it does that. What's the espresso like? As I always point out when I'm talking about espresso taste, it will depend on the beans and on the quality of the extraction, which isn't all down to the machine. But in terms of shot potential, I think this is going to be very, very difficult to beat from any other integrated grinder machine. I do think they need to make the barista guidance better to bring this potential into the reach of a wider audience. But as I've said, I'm sure they'll sort this with a future firmware update. What's the cold brew and cold pressed espresso like? It's actually surprisingly enjoyable for someone who wouldn't usually think of drinking coffee cold. As I said with the Ninja Luxe, I think cold brew fans will probably dispute that this is actually cold brew or tastes like cold brew, but as someone who doesn't usually drink cold brew, I like it. The cold pressed espresso as the base for iced coffees I've found really good in the limited number of times I've tried it so far. If you're asking the inevitable question, which makes the best cold pressed espresso and cold brew style coffee, this or the Ninja Luxe, I will put that to the test very soon. I've not tested them side by side yet. Will the Oracle Jet do cold foam? It won't. I'm not sure if this could be possible in the future via a firmware update. There is an air pump, so I don't know if they could create a cold froth setting that just activates this and doesn't run steam. I will try to find out the answer to that, but I'm thinking if they could have, they probably would have, as I can't think why they'd give it cold pressed espresso but not give it cold frothing, if that were possible. So there we go. In a nutshell, as it is without the updates I've mentioned that I think it really needs, I think this is almost perfect. If they fix these issues with a firmware update, which I can't imagine they wouldn't, then I think this will be the best fully assisted portafilter espresso machine on the market for anyone who tends to make a relatively small number of coffees at a time. Coffee Cave's comment of the week!
David Forbes 6250 commented on the DeLonghi Iletta Explore review, and he says, question mark?
Exclamation mark. Oh, sorry, I thought we were playing a game. Thank you very much for watching, and if you think coffee is... yes. You enjoyed this video, please drop us a like on the video as it really helps. And we've got tons of content about how to make better coffee at home to take you from beginner to home barista. We've got reviews and how-tos on the most popular machines. If you like the sound of that, click on my face to subscribe. Tatty bye.